All right, diving into it. I'm going to push on from where I left off with my Get Things Done app. So we'll jump into the front end here and then run dev server. And for those of you that are new to what I'm doing with this stream, basically the architecture is going to be overkill because I'm working on basically an architectural foundation for building new Quasar apps. And I want to build something that's kind of shareable, that's a little bit more of a foundation than what you usually get with Quasar, or any Vue app for that matter. All right, so we'll run dev on the back end as well. And we'll need you in a second. So let's open that up and try jumping onto the dashboard. Cool, looks like I'm already logged in, which is good. And where was I at? So I'm pretty sure that I had a page. Yeah, let's jump into the routes here. Oh, that's right. One of the things I was playing around with last time was basically having this pages directory and then doing auto routing with this pages directory. And one thing I did discover is that you can use partials here. So stuff like this now, I think what I can do is say underscores like that to denote that it's a partial. Yeah. Which is kind of annoying. I feel like this is a little bit overkill with the double underscores. Hello, Nigel. Yeah, well, your story is kind of one of the inspirations that kind of set me on this path of originally it was very much let's just show people how to build a larger application, a larger sort of scalable application. But now I'm thinking it would be great to also have a repository. It's a very, very basic repository in terms of what it does, but it's built in such a way that it's much more scalable and has generators and things like that to ensure that new developers put things in the right spot. So kind of like, uh, not everything you need for a scalable app, but a lot of things that you might need for building a scalable application. All right, so let's come in here, and I believe all I have to do now is put some underscores in here. And that means that they're going to be skipped. So I want to check that that's going to work. Whack that on that side, jump out of full screen here and throw that over there. Okay. And now this page will be, it's just underscore step, so I can put the name of a step. And I believe one of them is, oh goodness, I can't remember to be honest. So let's come back in here. One of them is capture. All right, there we go. So it looks like that's working. You can see all my random ones I was throwing in there to try and get this up and running. All right, so the next thing I want to check though is that these other routes are not being called. So let's just do a quick test on that. We'll create a new file in here called just tester.view, tester underscore dot view, a template here, and test. So that should not work. I should not be able to go to slash tester. Okay, that's because it's being caught by this step route. So I know that that's fine. And even with these underscores, that should not work. Okay, and it doesn't. Good. So actually, a better way that we can check this is to see if the routes file is actually picking up on that. So let's just check if that's clean. So where's my routes directory? Here we go, router, auto routing. These are the generated routes. Oh, okay, the top is just, it looks like they might just be imports. Yeah, here we go. Step panels, capture panel. So that should not be there. Huh. All right, so maybe this just needs to be run again. There might be a few things I need to change with this app extension to get it working correctly. So we'll give that a second to run and see if that's going to change this generated routes file. I've been using Vite lately, and it is looking like it's starting to run a little bit faster, which is kind of cool. Not faster, sorry. It looks like a lot of the problems I had in the past with it are starting to get fixed with hot module reloading and stuff like that. Organized panel. So where is that coming from? Oh, okay, so that's in here. Okay, so it looks like this is actually doing what it should be doing. This is basically a partial. That's what these underscores mean, by the way. That means it's a partial. And it's going to be ignored by the route generator. Which is great. This is something that was really like bugging me before, the fact that I couldn't do this. I think that's kind of ugly, but I can deal with that. And I don't think I've got a way to change it. See, what I wanted to do is basically say, hey, only include routes that end with the word page. So eventually I might even fork the repo for the auto route generator and see if I can just set that up myself. It looks like the repo is not very active anymore anyway, so I can probably just maintain my own version if I really want that functionality. But anyway, let's say that for another day. And there we go. We're only getting the index page, the user dashboard, and the step. Yeah, okay, so that's working perfectly. Doing the underscores means that that's ignored. That's kind of nice. That's been solved. And now for the tabs, we'll have to come in here and add those underscores to when we're grabbing those components. Let's see if I can do this accurately enough. If I miss one, then I have to start again. Sweet. Cool. So now let's go to /capture. And the next thing I want to do, and I think a lot of you might be interested in this part, is if I jump over to my composables for this page. Yeah, it is in step. And I believe it's in the capture panel. Yeah, so these are the composables that I'm using currently to get it all working. So we've got a composable for fetching, and we've got one for creating. But now I'm going to be updating and deleting as well. So what I eventually want to do, and I'm probably going to do that in this video, make a composable that is for creating, updating, and deleting. So one that basically unifies create, update, and delete, and fetch into one composable. And so first we'll get all of this working, and then if I have time, I'll start doing that as well. All right, so let's carry on. Next, I want to have a delete button. What have I got going on here? So we've got is that an input? No, that's the input of the, okay, so we want to jump into manage tasks. Here we go. And then this is going to have a delete button. We've got a queue item section with nothing, which is why it's showing up in the wrong spot there. Yeah, there we go. So let's start with delete. That seems like it would be one of the easier options. So we can say q-button here. And the icon is going to be, what is it? I think it might actually be called delete. Yep, there it is. That'll be in its own queue item section. So let's do that and whack that in there. Now we need to tell this that it's on the side. So we say side, which means that it kind of displays a bit nicer, adds a bit of coloring to it. And we also want this to be flat and round. I think that'll be a nicer effect, flat and round. There we go. That's a little bit big, so let's change the size equal to small. Cool. So we've got our button. Now this is a very important architectural decision that I make. None of the deleting happens on this component. That's really important. Rather than doing that, this alerts the parent component that it wants to delete an item, and then the parent component then takes care of deleting it. That's a very important concept with separation of concerns. Some people will actually send the delete function down to this component. I personally don't like that because it means that I can't do some, more stuff on the parent component if I want to, or at least it's kind of harder to sort of see. I like to have all my functionality sitting in one spot. All right, anyway, I'm talking too much. So let's say @click is equal to, well, that's going to probably just do the emit directly. So we'll come in here and say define emit, and come in here and we'll say const emit is equal to define emit, and we might just call that delete. So this is where we need to think about the API. From the parent component, you're imagining you got manage task list and then delete as the event on there. You could say on delete, but to be honest, I think delete is enough to communicate what's happening here. So I'm going to stick with that. And then here we can say emit delete. And look at that nice completion we get. See, the fact that we define our emits up there means that we do get this really nice completion. All right, so delete, we should probably send through the thing that we're deleting as well. So let's send through the task here like this. And that will be it. So now let's jump into the capture panel again. And we should get a delete here with the task that needs to be deleted. So let's say at delete is equal to, we'll say on delete for now, and I'm going to try and make this as clean as possible. It might take me a bit of time to write this functionality out, and that's because I do want to end up with a gorgeous API in the end. So let's just do something basic to begin with. Console.log delete, just to check that's working. I spelled that wrong, but nobody cares. Yep. And then we should get the task being sent through there as well. So let's test that. Yep, so I am getting that task sent through. Let's go full screen here. Yeah, and we've got the ID and the attributes. Now, one thing I think I built, yeah, here we go. So I've also got this thing that allows us to manage state as well. And this is really cool because it separates our state from our fetching, from our creating, from our deleting, etc. All the state is just managed in this composable. So let's jump in there and take a look at what it looks like. And basically, all of your like deleting, you're inserting, all that kind of stuff that you don't want to write over and over again is just sitting inside of this one composable, and it's reusable. So that means that we can just send through the collection of things that we want to manipulate and any options, like if the ID is something different. So I created like this little state thing, state machine. I don't know what you really call it. I don't think it's a state machine. That's another concept that I need to learn about. But now, without deleting it on the back end, let's say we can say collection dot, what is it, remove? I'm not getting auto completion there. Why not? That's really frustrating. Oops. It's all right, I'll just have to deal with it, I think. It's being returned there. It's use model collection state. Yeah, it's being called the right thing. I don't know. All right, it's probably because the way this is being imported. I think I need to change that so that it's got at least one slash in it, but I'll think about that later on. So let's say collection dot remove, and now I should be able to just send through the task directly there. So let's have a look at that and see if it actually works. Yep, so they're being deleted, but if I refresh the page, they'll come back again. And that's because it hasn't actually been deleted. We can now say async. And by the way, ultimately, I want an API that looks like this. Hey, task creator, when you're done creating, just immediately call insert, and that's going to send through the task. And therefore, you end up with this really, really clean way of handling it. These work really nicely together. But if you want to do other stuff, if that's important to you, then you just send through a function here with your task, right? And now I can just say, hey, collection dot insert, send through the task, but now I've got all of this breadth to do all the other stuff that I might want to do there. So I really like doing things in this way with a callback function. Yeah, I mean, simple by default, but extensible if we need to extend it. All right, so on delete, have we got a delete composable? I use the word remove because using the word delete can be problematic because you end up with some clashes. So we use remove task, and I should be able to just say const task remover is equal to use remove task. And am I going to need a schema? I actually don't need a... Okay, it does use a schema. Why does it need a schema for that, I wonder? Let's have a look at my resource for this. Oh, okay, it's because when you remove a task, you actually get that task back. So I do want to be able to look at it. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I want to move this to TypeScript. In fact, I made a mistake. I think I should have actually done it from the start. Because originally I thought, you know what, let's just do it without TypeScript so people can get at least up and running with this series when I eventually build the series. But I'm slowly starting to realize that it's probably better just to use TypeScript from the get-go. I don't know, it's a tough one because I want it to be a little bit more approachable to people that are new, but I also want it to be, robust, and it doesn't feel as robust without TypeScript. So anyway, I'll do some more thinking on that. I think I might agree with you. It's probably better just to use TypeScript up front. But now we've got this task remover. We'll say task remover dot on remove. Have I actually got that yet? On remove. Okay, I don't. So what I'll do is I'll split this. Let's create that functionality. We've got use create task or create resource, and this should have a on create. I'm basically just going to grab some of this functionality here. I reckon I'll extract this as well. It'd be cool to have your own sort of callback composable. And actually, I wouldn't be surprised if use has something available for that. So instead of create here, we'll change that to remove. On remove, we've got the callback, which then okay, pushes onto the callbacks because you can have more than one callback. That's why I created the API this way. And then this gets called somewhere down the line. So that would be here. This is where we then basically go through all of them and call those callbacks. So we'll come down here and we want to say only if it was successful. Yes, only if it was successful, you call the callbacks. And we need to change that to on remove callback. And if I called it a resource here, removed resource. I might just change that to resource because that seems to be the new norm that I'm using now. Resource to value. Okay, on remove callback now needs to be exposed. No, not the callbacks. We just want the function on remove to be exposed. And I think that's it. So now if we come back here, we should be able to call on remove. And once again, I'm not getting the auto completion. Yes, TypeScript would be amazing right now. So I can close out of that now. I think that's all I have to do. Use remove task, and now we should be able to say await task remover dot remove. Let's see if that works. And we'll use that on function in a second. I just want to do it in here so that we can sort of explore what all of this looks like. Let's whack that onto the other side of the screen again. And I guess just see if it works. Oops, what am I doing? I'll just do a quick refresh. All right, so it looks like it did try and make a request. Expected value of type ID found null. I should look at the request itself. There's probably some tools I can get to make this a little bit easier to see. Okay, so that ID on delete task is being set to null. So let's go back into our remove task resource. And it looks like I'm not seeing any ID being sent through at all there. Yeah, it's got no way of figuring out its ID, so it looks like I didn't fully flesh this out. Okay, so this has been... Oh, so we set the ID with a ref beforehand. And you know what? I might actually allow both. I might allow it so that you can just send remove the ID through here. Or the task itself that you want to remove. I don't know. I'll think about that, but for now, let's come back into our capture panel and we'll say task remover.id.value is equal to, I believe it's task.id. So let's try that and see if that works. All right, looks like that worked. Are they actually getting removed though? I'm not getting any errors, but they're not getting removed. Oh, that's annoying. Task remover.remove. Okay, so I guess we can have a look at what the request looks like. Delete task, it sends through an ID. All right, so let's get a look at that schema. I wonder if it exposes the schema. I think I might have done that. Yeah, okay, it does expose. Oh no, I don't want the schema, I want the query. All right, so I'm not exposing that. So what I might do is I'll just say here console.log what the query looks like. GraphQL.query. Do I do .value there? I'm surprised it's not .value. Yeah, it's a computed property. Okay, so we've got the query we can access directly there. So query.value. All right, I see now. Let's give this a try and see what we're getting back. Maybe it doesn't like that this is a string. All right, I don't see anything wrong with that. So let's jump into a Strappy UI, which is, I think, 1337 is what they use. There it is. But instead of admin, I want to go to GraphQL. And now let's figure out why this is not actually deleting the item. Remove task with an ID of 4. All right, I definitely should not be able to do that multiple times. Let's try 4 like this. Ah, something funky is going on here. GraphQL, delete. What is this, dgraph? Okay, I'm on some weird site now. It's not what I intended. So remove or delete. I didn't even tell you here. Remove maybe? Yeah, it looks like I'm just using the if somebody's got better GraphQL chops than me, then please let me know how I do this because I'm kind of new to this sort of thing. Maybe that needs to be a filter like what we're seeing here. Okay, so they use, yeah, it might be like this. I thought I had this working before though. Let's try filter. Nope, it's just saying data. Man, is anything going wrong in the back end? No, it looks pretty clean. What is going? Love TypeScript. If this is advanced Quasar, it's likely your audience will already be in TypeScript. Yeah, maybe. There's actually quite a huge community of people that don't use TypeScript, even on large scale applications. Um, in fact, I've seen a lot of people that have built large applications not using TypeScript. And I think that's because, I don't know, maybe it's just too much of an effort to upgrade, or maybe people just don't like TypeScript. They don't like that they have to teach new people. I mean, I do personally feel, and it is a personal thing, that TypeScript is pretty beneficial for larger scale applications, especially if it's something that you want to do for more than 1, 2, 3 years. It kind of gets pretty unwieldy as things get more complex. But I can understand where if you're building a large application, but it's like a large blog application, maybe then you wouldn't want need TypeScript because things are a little bit more obvious, and TypeScript might feel more overkill. I don't know, but I personally prefer using it even with smaller applications, to be honest, because once you do get used to it, it almost feels like too much of a burden not to use it. So yeah, I don't know. I'm still kind of on the edge about that, figuring out if we should at least do a little bit of an intro and then bring it in. But I don't know. I'll think about it more. I've made a few components today. It's a side menu with native like touching handling, and I was wondering how to share it on npm. Good question. You'd probably want to check out the app extension page um, on Quasar, and I will end up doing a whole series on Quasar app extensions. I just don't really have the time right now, but it'll happen. Okay, so I'm sure I got this working before. There's one with an ID of 6, so let's try this. Let's try deleting one with an ID of 6. All right, and it came back. Run that again. All right, so this is working. All right, so you still get a success even if it doesn't work. Okay, that's kind of frustrating. It's probably intentional though. It's probably some GraphQL thing that I don't understand. So Let's just leave that. And I'm guessing then, for some reason, the ID isn't being passed through correctly. Because I can delete all of these, refresh the page. Oh, all right. So maybe something is going wrong with the keys in that menu. Let's go to the Manage Task List. We're using the task ID in order to identify it. All right, looks like maybe it is working. Let's try this. 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 4. So the order's out a little bit. And we'll say 1, 6, 4, 3. So I should end up with 2 and 5 left. All right, so maybe this is actually working fine. All right, there we go. We just went on a little tangent for a second then, which turned into nothing. Okay, so next, let's jump over to a capture panel again. And it looks like that's working correctly. We'll add the spinner and stuff in a moment. Actually, I could probably do that now. Okay, this is going to be an interesting question. How do I get the spinners to show on the right task when it's removing? So I guess what you could do is say removing and then give it an object or the ID of the thing that is removing. Yeah, okay. I think I did decide I was going to build that later on. So what I do want to do is say when you remove something, removing rather than being just a Boolean true or false, it's an ID of the thing that is being removed. I feel like that would be kind of handy. But then if you're removing multiple things at once, how does that work? I've actually never had this problem before. Imagine you do it like this. You'd send through an array of IDs for what's being removed. But in this case, we've only got one remover. Okay, so let's just give this a try. I'll try stubbing it out and see what happens. Let's say task remover dot removing. And now we can jump into use remove task, which is using the resource. And we should have removing somewhere in here. Here it is. But I want to change that, whoops, to an ID. So now what I can do is say const removing is equal to a computed property. Oh, did I pull that out of the right place? Yep, I did. Cool. And essentially we want to say if it is removing, so we'll return here GraphQL is fetching because that's basically what it's called in the fetch API, which is what we're using under the scenes. So it says it's fetching, but that kind of just means it's making a request. The naming there is not very clear. Okay, so if it is fetching, we return the ID. Yeah, let's do it that way. So we'll come in here, removing, and then we can say ID dot value and otherwise false. Or maybe undefined in this case. So an ID or false. No, we'll say ID or false. I think that does actually make more sense. Okay, so that means that I should now be able to say removing is equal to task remover removing dot value. So that's actually going to give us a number, an ID of the thing that's being removed. So now I can come in here and say removing. Is that required? Yeah, I see no reason not to make that true. Otherwise, it's not really fully featured. And then we'll say the type is equal to either a Boolean or Oh, that's got to be a capital B. Or a string or a number. There we go. So now we should be able to say this is loading if it's removing. But more specifically, if removing is equal to the task's ID. Cool. I've always wanted to solve this problem. Let's see if I actually have. 3, 4, 5. This API is way too fast, so I'm going to have to go into network, slow things down by saying slow 3G, and let's see if that works. Ha! I got it in 1. How cool is that? All right, very nice. And how good is this API? Like, we still end up with a really clean API. You are not a member of the one-liner zealot like me. Well, this might be a situation where a one-liner would make sense. No, I would not make this. I personally would not make this a one-liner. It's totally a matter of opinion. But that to me, and like this is totally a matter of opinion, that to me is not more readable. And maybe this is because I just can't hold very much in my head. I think compared to the average coder, maybe it's because I started later in life. I'm not very good at grokking a lot of stuff all at once. And that for me is too much. That starts to spin my brain out. Whereas here, I feel like mentally I can say, oh, I've got a computed property for removing. Let's see how that works now. I don't want that to be one thought, and that's why I like to have it in multiple lines. But I totally get it. If I saw this in somebody else's code, I wouldn't care. So, it's one of those things. Okay, so we got removing working, and this is a really clean API now. But next, we want to see if we can say task remover dot on remove. Did I call it on remove or on delete? On delete or on remove? Oh yeah, it's right there. On remove. Dot on remove. This lack of auto completion is killing me. Let's try restarting Vola. Give that a second. Actually, I think I know the problem. The problem is, I think using the spread operator here, task remover. Yeah, whenever I do spreading like this, it seems to mess up the auto completion, which sucks because I don't see why it wouldn't be able to figure that out. But not a big deal, so let's just move on. And now I should be able to say on remove, call this task remover dot remove function. And I know that that's going to send through the task. So, oh no, wait. Okay, I've got things the wrong way around. I want to say collection.remove here, like that. And instead of on delete, that means I can now come down here and say task remover dot remove, like that. So how clean is this? Like, I personally feel like this is really clean. You just call it straight out of the composable, but because we've got this really nifty on remove handler here, we can just say, hey, when you're done using our collection, and I don't like this, I think I should call that collection state. I don't know, what do you guys think? Collection state, maybe. Oh, actually, no, collection's pretty obvious. It's a collection. Or tasks. Yeah, maybe just tasks. Or task state. Yeah, task state. I think that works better. Nice. Collect, yeah, here it is here. Task state, and then I actually grab the collection. It's like ternary chain. I was really confused at first look, but when you use it a lot and you format it well, it's pretty good. Yeah, true. And honestly, I like ternaries. Actually, that's a really good point. Often I'll write something as a ternary, and I'll sit there for a second and look at it and think, you know what? If I'm really honest with myself, this is not easier. I think in this case, it is easier. Where is it? Use, remove, resource. In this case, I do like a ternary operator. But sometimes, especially like if it gets to about this long, if I start hitting the edge over here, I'll often just use an if statement. And I don't, like, I'm not someone who cares about more lines in code. I care about always being able to, always being able to understand it and being able to grok it as quickly as possible. And often I just don't believe, and I think a lot of coders are wrong about this, and maybe I'm the one that's wrong, but a lot of the time I feel like people just straight out use a ternary because I don't know, just like it feels cooler or something, or it looks like there's less lines of code. Or, they might do this. This is something that I'll often do. I'll have a ternary operator like this, and I'll do it on multiple lines like that. And I'll say, then that's easy to me because it's like, if this, then that, then that. But once it starts to get a little bit overwhelming, if my brain even gets a little bit overwhelming, then that tells me that Luke in the future is not going to be able to read this. Um, I don't know, but these one of those things that change with time as well. Like the more you go back to your code, the more you realize what is easier to read to you. So maybe for some reason people find it easier to grok things along the page like this. I don't like reading along the page. I get very overwhelmed when I read along the page. I can read easily down the page. Like even something like this definitely needs fixing. I don't know, at some point. Like I'd probably rather just do it like that. So how would I want to read this? I'd want to read this as, okay, I'm getting the data out of there. And now nested inside of there, whoops, I now have more data. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd probably do it like that. Even though it looks a bit funny, I feel like that's easier for me to read. Or like that. Yeah, so I'm pulling the data out of GraphQL. Nested in there, I've got another data object. And then I want you to get the delete task data. Yeah, I find this easier to read than having that in one line. Okay, I'm talking about this too much. So let's move on. So we've got we can remove tasks now. Let's do updating task as well. And let's see if we can keep this as clean as everything else. It might be a bit harder because often updates are a little bit more difficult to keep clean. Update task updater. I think that's the best terminology. This is an updater for tasks. So I like being able to say, hey, task updater, do this. It feels like it's a thing that I can talk to. So task updater, do use update task. There's that. That'll already have the schema because use update task will send it through. And now task updater is going to give me a form that I can play around with if I remember this correctly. Oh, that's the one that just sits above. Okay, so how does this work? All right, so in this case, what I want to do is I want to have a form in here, which would be this section here. Task updated. Okay, so rather than sending down the task, let's send down a form that we can use for that task. Shit, actually, this isn't that simple. So probably what I want to do here is create the form at this level, and this is why you split your composables up, so you can keep your code really clean in situations like this. Now I can say use form, there we go, I have it here, use form, and we'll say const, and I can say form because I don't need to call it a task form because I've got enough context here with the name of the component. And I think this accepts the schema. Man, I really wish I had TypeScript right now. Yeah, so this accepts a schema in here, which will be the task schema. And now I should be able to say here, let's get rid of that. This is going to do my head in for a little bit. Q-input, borderless, and dense, because I want it to just sit seamlessly in there. And now I should be able to say v model, and I've got my form here. But that doesn't give me a form back, I think. This is actually a... All right, so you'd have to pull the form out of here. This might be one of those situations actually where I can use destructuring. I don't usually like to destructure, but um, sometimes it can make sense. All right, so yeah, let's try destructuring. We'll pull it straight out of there. And then we should be able to say form dot... Oh man, I can't remember what it's called. Okay, let's go back. Form dot name. So let's just see what that gives me. See what problems I'm getting here. Yeah, okay, it's just complaining that I'm not actually using the task updater. Yeah, right, we'll get to that in a little bit. And let's see if that form is working. Yeah, cool. It looks like it is. But they both need to have their own form. Crap, so maybe this isn't the best way to do it. Maybe the best thing to do is say, hey, when this is unfocused, alert the parent. But the problem is if you don't model something here... Actually, let's see if I can just not model something there. The problem is I'd need to have something modeled on this form, I'm pretty sure, because if you don't model something, then when you type into it, it just goes to blank. Yeah. So I need to have some sort of... There's also another problem with ternary. I remember that the order of things is not the same in other languages like Python. Really? I didn't know that. I haven't done a lot of Python programming, but... Oh man, that would be really frustrating if you have to kind of like, you know, switch your brain between the two. Interesting. Okay, what's the best way to do this? All right, we need to think about this. And I know I'm spending a lot of time on these things, and I wouldn't usually spend this much time, but well, to be honest, I probably would, but not in a live stream. But the whole point of this series is to find the cleanest solution to these common problems, so that when we build this scalable sort of application foundation, people have a point of reference for solving all of these really annoying nitty-gritty problems. So here, the problem let me try and describe the problem. It might help me solve it. The problem I have here is Q input needs to be modeling something. If it's not modeling something, then the value disappears straight away. Okay. Now, I can't just model it on the parent component, because that would mean I would manually, for the parent, have to set up something to be modeled for every single list item, and that would be very annoying to do. But I don't want it to be annoying for the parent. I want the parent to be to want it to be as simple as possible. So what I'm thinking is I might actually break this down by having a separate input for the name field, and that way it can have its own state. Usually the right solution is to break things down more, so I think that's what I'm going to do in this case. So we'll come in here, this is our task and the components for the task, and we'll have one called name input. Let's go with that. We'll set up a template for this, and then I'm going to say proxy, model proxy. This is a really cool trick that I have, and now I can say model value there. Actually, we might not have to do any model proxying, because we might be able to just use it directly here and have no props. Let me think about this for a second. No, so the problem is this needs to have this needs to have its own state. All right, so maybe that's not the best solution. You know what might be a good idea? If we have another composable for creating multiple forms. All right. Sweet, this is going to take me on a really great tangent. So we've got use form. Let's say reveal so we can see where that is in our editor. What if we have another one called use forms? Use forms.js. Export function use forms. How would this look? So I'm imagining I'm in a situation where I need lots of forms so that on the parent, it can just use this composable and maybe send. Where would that sit? What is the cleanest way to do this? Okay, I need to abstract out again so I can think of the cleanest solution that I want. So ultimately what I want to do is on my manage task list say at update is equal to, and then we'll say on update, something like that. Let's just try doing it inline for now. So that would accept that would give us the task. Yeah. And then what we do is we'd say, hey, task updater, I want you to say that your ID is equal to, actually, ideally, we can just say task updater and just send it in the task and it knows how to get the ID already. That would be the simplest solution to me. So task updater dot update, this would be async, and then we would await that. So in other words, we don't want to do any modeling at this point. We just want to do the modeling lower down the chain. But do we lose any benefits to that? See, actually, maybe this isn't the best solution because maybe you do something like this. You say v-model and then say forms. And then you could say task forms. And maybe each form is then keyed by the ID of the task. No, because you would want the task forms to be able to not have IDs. So that couldn't work either if that was a composable. So hopefully you guys enjoy listening to me just talking these problems out loud because otherwise this is going to be not the most thrilling stream, but it's kind of cool. I imagine maybe like, you know, in the future we can come back and listen to these and see how I came to conclusions to these rather annoying problems. So this is risky. The reason this is risky is I now have no knowledge at this level on the parent component. I now do not have any knowledge of what the current modeling is under the hood. So that means that I've got slightly less control over how this whole updating process works. Whereas if I'm modeling each of the forms independently and I've got an easy way to do that on the parent component, then I can decide, for example, to hijack the update process. I can then say, hey, when you're updating a task, I now have knowledge of all of the forms. Or maybe I can say, hey, I want to be able to call the update myself. You know, I don't actually know why I would want to do that right now, but I know from experience that it's important to have knowledge of the data on the parent component. But if the modeling happens on the child component, the parent component now doesn't have any knowledge of what that child component looks like as it's being changed. And again, this might not seem like a big deal, but I guarantee you at some point down the line, I'm going to have code like this and say, well, hang on, I want to know what's happening to that task, you know, at the time that it is being updated. I suppose you could do that through an event system because but then the other problem is, this is then kind of in control of the initial modeling. Oh, shit. Oh man, I think I need to take a break. I really don't know what's the cleanest solution here. Is the parent in charge? Is the parent in charge of figuring out what the forms look like? is in charge. Otherwise, how does this know what the form is? It then generates its own form, and if it creates its own form, we have less flexibility over what the forms could look like in their initial state. So this solution is more flexible than just using events. And therefore, I almost certainly want to go with it, because otherwise you end up shooting yourself in the foot at some point. Okay, so then what does task forms look like? Is that an array of forms? It can't be an array of forms. It has to have IDs, because otherwise how do I match it up to each of the form? Unless we don't send through a collection, we do one more step here where we turn it into a form. Or we treat the collection as the form. No, that's risky, because then you can't do any reversing in any sane way with your updates. All right. I think I'm gonna have to take a break. I would regroup all the data and manipulation outside the view file in a store with a state file and an action file. Well, that's kind of what this solution is. Basically saying, let's put all of the data that we're going to change inside of a store. I definitely want to pass it down, no doubt at all. One thing that I want to steer clear of as much as possible in my applications, especially when the larger scale, is global state. Global state is death for larger applications. The only time I use global state is for all of my models. But even then, I'm starting to wonder if that's a good idea. So I'll use something like VueXORM to keep all of my models in global state. So it's kind of like a database that I can then access on the front end. Apart from that, the only time I can think of that's legit for using global state, like there's a few tiny ones here and there, maybe like toggling, this on and off, the left, the menu up here in case you need to do that somewhere down the line, and also user authentication. I think you kind of need to keep that in global state. Aside from that, but I think what you're talking about isn't global state. It's kind of it's still sitting in a store, but it's a local, it's an instance of a store, and that's essentially what I'm thinking about doing here. And that's kind of what this is. It's its own store, but the problem with that is this store, that's kind of our source of truth. I don't want to change the collection based on updated form data. Yeah, these need to be separate, because otherwise you might change this data. The request is unsuccessful, but then you need to kind of go back and change it again, and that can get messy if you don't sort of have separate states for the two. All right, so sorry. All right, I'm going to be a little bit silent for a moment here while I sit down and kind of nut this problem out in my head. Stand up, maybe. Okay, so if I have a place to create some forms, the problem with that solution is that what if I only send the forms down? What if instead of sending the tasks down, I send down the task forms? Okay, what if I do just create the forms on a local level, so each task gets its own form? If each task gets its own form, then I don't have the ID problem anymore. But then that can't be modeled on the parent component. So I lose flexibility. Why does it have to be modeled on the parent? Do I actually lose flexibility? But then there's too much magic happening in the manage tasks list because it now has to take the tasks and turn them into a form behind the scenes. So, okay, so I am now sort of liking the idea of maybe, oh shit, maybe I don't even send tasks through. What? Okay, what about this? What if I have V model here? And we model the task state. Okay, I'm just going to go on this tangent and see where it takes me. We don't model forms anymore. I'm going to delete this code for now, even though I will actually use it in a second. All right, what's it squawking about? Missing required prop task. So we don't have tasks anymore. Instead, we've got model value. Now what we do is we emit update model value here, and then we'll say const task is equal to use v model. I don't know why they send it. And then that's going to need to be props. And I think this accepts, yeah, the props and then what it's called and then emit. So model value and then emit. Oops, put that in the wrong order. So now what I can do is say, hey, task in task. Yeah, so now here I can model task dot name. Let's see if that's going to break or if it works so far. Why are they blank by default though? Doesn't make sense. Are they blank on the back end as well? No. Oh, it's not name. I have to go through the attributes first. So what if we say task dot attributes dot name like that? All right, doesn't like something there. All right, let's just do a pre-tag in here, make sure I'm dealing with the data correctly. Okay, so a task will have attributes.name. What's it complaining about? We'll find out. Oh, I spelled this wrong. Oh, let's just copy paste that. All right, so let's get rid of this. Save it. Everything goes in there correctly. It's also being modeled correctly because it's directly on the collection. Now, the reason I came up with before, see, now Nigel tells me that there's two R's in attribute. I wish I wasn't such a delay here, and I would have picked up on that earlier. Actually, is there a way I can do that? Does YouTube give me an option for getting rid of more of the delay? It probably does, but we'll say that for another time. Okay, so now I need to work through the problems with this solution and see if it is actually workable. So this is clean to me. This is really nice because not only are they sent through, they're also all modeled on an individual level. I still have flexibility. The only problem might be, what about reversing the data once I've entered it in? So the problem is, since this is being directly modeled, if I end up with an error on the back end, I've got no way of going back to what the value originally was. Unless we make this lazy. I think that's how you do it. Holy crap, this might actually be it. So, TEST. Okay, so now how about we say underneath here in a pre-tag, we just spit out what the name current value currently is. And I need to make sure that that doesn't actually change. Why didn't that work? Oh, I did it in the wrong spot. What am I doing? Oh, I did that underneath the search item. Come on, Luke. This is why you need to take breaks. I feel like I can't take breaks when I'm doing live streams, which is probably a bit silly because you'd all probably want me to take breaks so you can go make a sandwich or something. All right, so let's try this. Now, that should not update until I've looked away. Okay, so that's updating on the fly. We need to figure out how to make it lazy. I'm pretty sure there's a way to do this. I don't need you, don't need you, don't need you. So let's say Q input, and we're looking for something that is lazy. Lazy rules, no. It might be vmodel.lazy. Do they talk about it at all in the API? No, they just talk about lazy rules. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this might actually be a view thing. Otherwise, I can just do it manually, but I don't want to have to do it manually. No. Oops. Okay, well, actually, manually isn't that difficult because we just come in here and we say at blur. No, I don't want to have to do this every time I do the component. All right, so is there anything here related to state? No, so let's look up view lazy model, something like that. Dot lazy. You can add the dot lazy modifier. Yeah, okay, that's what I did. That didn't work. Vmodel dot lazy. Meaning that that should not be updating on the fly. Oops. See, this breaks it. If I can't make this lazy, then we have a problem because there's no way for me to revert it when I do the update because I don't know what the original value was. And even though I'm not going to implement that functionality right now, I will at some point. And is there any other way I can get that original data? It's sitting here. No, this is the only place that we have it. Unless we say vmodel forms and we basically just create 2 copies of it. No, because that's overkill then, because then you've got a performance issue, and there's no way I'm going to build this out and allow people to create, bad performing apps because I was too lazy to figure out how to get this working. So let's quickly look at what the blur solution might look like. Does blur give me a value? Okay, it just gives me the event, which I can then get the value from, which is risky for some components. So I don't want to do it that way either. Why don't we get dot lazy? Okay, but let's just imagine I can solve this problem. All right, let's just move forward a little bit and imagine that I can somehow make this lazy. We'll give that a try later on. Hang on, I just want to do a quick little search. This is going to do my head in. Behavior. Reverse fill error. No, I really doubt that it would be in here. Yeah, it won't be in style. And I did a little search before, and the only thing I saw was related to lazy rules. On-demand string. Yeah, okay, nah. We'll save this for another time. I can try and get that solved later. I'm sure that there's a solution. So let's get rid of the pre-tag and basically just test how we might do this update in the cleanest way possible. And by the way, I am going to make this even cleaner in the future so that all of this can be done with one composable when you're dealing with a whole lot, when you're basically dealing with your full CRUD operations, but we'll do that in a little bit. So now we need to be able to say at update here, and essentially I would love, if this is possible, be able to say task updater dot update. So we end up with a gorgeous API just like the other ones. So let's go for what we want and see if we can actually make it a reality. Then we say here at blur, you then perform the update, and you do that by basically saying emit update, which I now need to create inside of here. So update. By the way, when I'm done with this, there's no reason I couldn't abstract this concept as well to make it a little bit better. So then we say update here, and that's going to need the task itself. So then here we say at update, task updater, core update. It needs the ID of the thing it's updating though. So does it? No. No, it just needs a task, which we're already sending through. All right, so if we get rid of that, I think that means it actually gets called with the task. All right, what's going wrong now? Okay, now I actually need our task updater. Let's bring that back in, and we'll pull that in from here. I might want to multi-line this. Okay. So then we say task updater. Do I have on update? Let's see if that's been implemented. I really hope I have. On. Nah, I haven't done it yet. Ugh. Okay, so let's say, let's use our creator. We'll copy that in here and paste it in there. On update, we've got our callback. And then when it's done, if there is no error, we can then say on update callback. And are we calling it a resource here? No, we're calling it updated resource. So let's change that to resource because that's going to be my new standard. On update now needs to be exposed. And that means that I can now say here on update, and essentially think we can do a task insert because it uses the ID behind the scenes. So that should actually work with an update as well. All right, what's it squawking about now? Let's go full screen here. I feel like a lot of this use update task is not a function. Okay then. Where is that happening? Task updater is use update task. Why would that not be a function? I mean, it clearly is a function. All right, so Luke's done something wrong. Use update task is not a function. Why is this coming out of somewhere else? Ah, I put it out of the wrong spot. Yeah, okay. Totally my bad. That's why it wasn't a function, because it wasn't a function. To change. All right, that's positive. Something's happened. The ID is not being passed through. So let's do a little bit of recon here. Task updater.update is getting called. And it should be accepting the task. So we can test that by saying task here. Do I have that logging boot file? Slash. Oh, yes, I do. So I think I can actually do this. This is really helpful. I think I can just say log or $log. Actually, let's just find out what it is. Logger. Yeah, just $log. So I can just say $log and give me the task. Just want to check that's correct. Okay, so we do get the task, and it's got attributes and it's got ID. So, okay, so now we want to say, hey, task updater. Hang on, where's our creator? Create and then reset form. Yeah, okay, task. Use update resource. Maybe I should make it so that I can send the task through here directly. This gives me a form. Yeah, let's try this. If you want, you can send the task through directly. And then we could say if a task was actually sent through, oh, sorry, not task, just a resource. Then we will set. No, I kind of want to force it to always be done the same way. So even though this might make the code a little bit more lengthy, it's really not that much more lengthy. I think I'd rather just do this. We now say task.id.value, and this will be abstracted at some point anyway. So at this level, I don't want to make that possible. Wait, task updater.id.value is equal to task.id, and we'll then just call update. And then that will have the correct ID, and the form should be correct because it's already been. The form will not be correct, actually. So we'll have to say task updater.form.value is equal to task.attributes. See, it would be really handy if this was just already being modeled. Yeah, we can do better than this. We can definitely do better than this. If they were in sync, that wouldn't be a problem anymore. Is that working now? Yeah, okay, so that's working, but I'm still not happy because. All right, let's just do the next thing, and then I'll move on to it. So updating is equal to task updater. I'll use the same concept here, updating.value. And then we can say update resource, and now updating is now going to be a computed property. And let's make that open. We'll come into use remove resource and basically just copy that functionality. Yeah, here we go. So now I can say updating instead there. And if that's running, then we set it to the ID, otherwise false. So now that can be updating. Okay, very nice. And this means that, yeah, okay, so now the updating is being sent through. So now on manage tasks, we've got removing, we've also got updating. And maybe at some point I can harmonize that into something called loading state. Yeah, so eventually I'd like to have a way to be able to just send through loading state like this. And when we have our ultimate composable, we can just say like task service, because this will be the service for dealing with removing, updating, deleting, like all that sort of stuff of the task. And then dot loading state, something like that maybe. Yeah, but anyway, we can save that for another time. Actually, I think I might actually like this because it is pretty clear what's happening. Okay, so updating is now being sent through, and similar for what we're doing with removing, we can do the exact same thing with updating. Nice, and now we come in here, we slow our network down, changed, and it didn't work. Right, what have I done wrong here? Oh, updating. Maybe that'll work, Luke. Again, there's our spinner, and it's done. But I know we can do slightly better. That I'm okay with. I want you to have to change the ID because that will eventually be abstracted out. That I'm okay with. Actually, this all looks good to me. What did I have a problem with? I can't remember now. That's right. I think I was saying we're setting it to attributes here. I wonder if we could just create a task updater. But if I created a task updater for every single one of these, then you've got all the overhead of creating all of those task updaters. And you don't want to do that. You just want to have one composable, and then you just change the ID on that composable, and that's it. I don't know, maybe I can just give the option where you send through the ID. Or the task. I mean, it's already being sent anyway. All right, screw it. I'm going to give this a try. Okay, so update resource. Here it is here. Let's say you can send through the resource if you want. And then if the resource was sent through, then I'll set the ID.value equal to resource. And to get the ID, I actually need to get it from our options here because we wanted it to be flexible. Yeah, options dot ID. Like that. So that's going to get us the ID of the resource. And we also want to set the attributes as well. So then we can say, what was it here? Form. So form dot value Is it? No, form service. We have to pull it out of the form service. So form service dot form dot value is equal to resource dot attributes. Okay, so now the form is correct, the ID is correct, and all of this code turns into this because I know that task's already being sent through, and the code is now that. So I don't know, maybe well, I don't see any reason you couldn't just offer both. Allows you to create a cleaner API if you need it. So then you can say check change. All right, it didn't like something there, which is okay. I didn't expect it to work first time. Okay, so we're getting undefined for the ID there. Why would that be? The resource, let's quickly check that we're actually getting a resource sent through. Okay, we are. Now it should be saying here by saying options.id resource ID, which in this case would jump into target and give us an ID of 25. So let's console.log here. Whoops, resource ID. See what that gives me. Undefined. All right, so, oh, okay, that's right. We set ID like that. Oh, wait, this is wrong. Ah, I wanted something for the ID field. Okay. I thought I had that. Maybe it's only on the create composable. Use create resource. Yeah, okay. So it looks like we're just hard coding it for now, but that's definitely something that needs to be fixed. You can't restrict people to just using ID as the ID. That's always going to cause issues in the future. You know, especially for pivot tables. Sometimes a pivot table, people access things with, you know, a combination of two fields, which totally makes sense because makes it easy to grab what you need in the future. So what is, okay, so this is for setting, yeah, the ID itself, not the ID field. That's where I got confused. All right, so what we'll do is we'll get rid of that. We'll change this to resource.id. And I'm going to write this on my little piece of paper here. Saying setting flexible ID field for robust composables. We'll call it that. Yeah. And one of the reasons this is important is you might not be using Strappy, and I want to easily be able to swap this out for any backend. Okay, so that's okay. For now, we'll just hard code it, resource.id, and then the attributes. Let's refresh that and see if it works. And it looks like it did. Let's refresh the page, and that did work. So now our API is a little bit cleaner still. Where is it? Yeah, look at that. That's really nice. And then you come in here, and this is beautiful as well. It's just bringing in the service, and just using it. Usually, I like all my fetch operations to happen at the end. So I'm going to put that down there. Sometimes you'll have like more than one fetch operation. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I reckon this looks really, really clean. It's like, here's all of my services. They all look the exact same. This is a good sign when your code, you know, creates a pattern like this. So at least it's in my experience, it is. Hang on. I thought we had a task creator. Use create task. We do. So let's change that from use create resource to use create task. We don't have to pass through the schema anymore. We don't need that anymore. And Tasks fetcher. So what about use fetch? Okay, we've got use fetch resource, but not for tasks. So let's go ahead and make this even more beautiful still. Now, the way I've organized this, this is another one of those situations where it looks like overkill, but it turns out not being if you're building larger applications. So the way I want to organize my logic is I've got a models directory here, and I'm not sure I've named this correctly, and I might consider renaming it, but it's not just the model itself. So of course I've got the schema for that model, and later on when I build JavaScript files for my models as well, that'll sit in here as well. But I also keep my components for that model, the composables for that model, and also any tests will be inside of here as well. So I might have like a test directory as well. And the cool thing about this is I want to, when you're building more scalable apps, you want to be able to create worlds. That's how I think of it, like mini applications. I want to be able to say, I'm now working on my task related stuff. So I'm going to jump in here, all my components, my composables, everything I need for building a task. And of course, there are some exceptions. So for example, reusable composables across models need to sit somewhere else. But for the most part, all my task related stuff just sits inside of this directory here. This is a fantastic experience when you're developing. Sometimes it takes a little bit more effort up front, which is why you want to have generators at some point once you've decided on your structure. But then it's really great because you can then just create a generator that might look something like this. And I actually end up, for one of the places that I work, building out an entire UI for this. But then you can say, for example, I don't know, generate or hydrogen generate, whatever you use. Maybe even just generate file or generate component. And it's going to ask a bunch of questions like, is this only going to be used for a specific model? And then you might say yes to that. And then it might say, is this, if you say no to it, it might ask another question like, will this be used across apps or just for a specific app? And then by answering those questions, it will make sure that the file gets created in the right place. So all you have to do is that initial upfront work, and then you end up with basically this little world where you can then start building all the stuff that you need to build. Okay, so let's wrap this up now by just doing that extra level of abstraction by creating a use fetch task composable. So come in here and say use fetch task.js. And this is going to be very similar. Well, I don't think we need that anymore to any of the other ones. So now use fetch resource. I really need to fix this up. I need to change it to API / something, but anywho. Yeah, this will probably be API / resource. Oh, which it kind of already is there. So now I can say here, use fetch task like that. And use fetch resource, I believe, does expect a schema. So that's already passed through. And now here, where is it? I should be able to just say use fetch task. That's wrong. It should be tasks plural. The only thing we need out of there now is state. I don't think I would pull that out of API. I think that's not organized very well on my behalf. But that's the whole reason I'm doing this series. Do all the organization up front. This has been really fun, by the way, to be like, what is all the crap that's gone wrong with me in the past? Let's see if we can avoid as much of it as possible by building a great foundation. So it's been a lot of fun. So now this should be use fetch tasks plural. So that now becomes, oh, that's right, we want it out of here. So use fetch tasks plural. And I need to make sure that I've updated the index file here. Tasks, man, this auto-completion is terrible. That now needs to be pluralized. plural, use fetch resource. That should be resources. Actually, that's wrong as well. Let's do the work and get it fixed now. Wait, it is resources? Okay, so let's jump back into that file. It looks like it's being exported wrong. So let's reveal that. Index here should be use fetch resources. Yeah, but it's fetch resources plural. All right, maybe I've just written it wrong. Use fetch tasks plural. That's all been pluralized. And use fetch tasks plural. All right, so now what doesn't it like? Oh no, it's still working. Cool. So there you go. We now don't need that schema anymore. That shouldn't be necessary. Yeah. Now, ultimately, what I want to do here is, and I keep mentioning this over and over again, but by turning all of these into one composable, if you need to just fetch tasks and you don't have to do any of this other stuff, then of course you can still just use the composable that's required. But one of the benefits here is you can start storing all of your composable functionality for that specific model in one place. So eventually, let's just imagine instead of no, not resource, I'm in the wrong spot. Let's imagine this is a composable for dealing with everything a task can do. So like create, read, update, delete. This is one composable for all of that. Then eventually what you could do is something like this. You could say like other functionality, and now you've got a place to put that. So you can also expose that here if you want, or I suppose you could just throw it in here as a separate composable. But yeah, this is kind of cool because it gives you a place to put other little bits of functionality that you might need. And by putting it here, I wouldn't put too much here, I guess, because then again, chances are stuff that you put on this composable is going to be very small pockets of functionality. But it's great because it means that you can easily communicate to other people on the team what you can do with a task. You just open up your use task composable and then you run down the line in your IDE and be like, oh, cool, I can do such and such with a task, which is kind of nice. But anyway, I think I'm going to wrap up now. This is really clean. I feel like we are almost there. Ultimately, that will be harmonized. When we've got one composable, creating will also reset the form. I wanted to not make it reset the form because on lower levels of functionality, you want to make sure you're not doing too much work. You're making sure that create only creates, reset only resets. And if you want to have like quote unquote side effects, which people hate in functional programming, and I don't mind a little bit of side effects, but not a lot. But the only place I think side effects are remotely acceptable is when you go further up the chain. And that's why I want to make sure that these are separated at this point. All you could do is say use create, and then maybe have a way to say like reset form and have like a callback there. That's another thing you could do to sort of make it simpler. Yeah, so the only thing we need to fix here is figuring out how to make sure this only calls the update. This only updates the task itself on blur, and I want to be able to do that without having to tap into the event. So let's just see what that would look like tapping into the event, and then I'll finish up. So the event there, we emit the update, and then this is instead model value. Let's just log that event so I can figure out. I think it's just event.target something or other. Yeah, so event dot target dot value. Yeah, okay. Just what I thought. And now we can also Actually, how do I change that? Oh, you would change it here. So then you just say task.attribute.name. Oh, there we go. It's all ready for me to go. Event.target.value, I believe is it. Test. All right, I've done something wrong. It's not a function. Oh, whoops. It certainly is not a function. Man, what am I doing wrong here? Maybe it's not dot value. It looked like in the console I had an underscore, so yeah, okay, weird. So event.target. Okay, let's just get the event. I haven't done coding like this in so long. Isn't that sad? I can't even do like traditional JavaScript coding anymore. I don't even know how this stuff works. But hey, technology moves on. Maybe it's just .val. Or maybe it's too late. I've lost the value by then. That would be a real shame. Okay, let's just quickly do this again. A bunch of Z's. Yeah, this might be getting changed before I've even got the chance to tap into it. Oh no. Well then how do I make this possible? Can I do like a find in here? Yeah, okay. Ah, bugger. Quasar. Lazy input. That was 2017, might be a bit old. Okay, use equivalent form of V model with value, which is different with a later version of Quasar. He's doing the same thing there though. Event.target.value. So rather than, oh no. Well, how do I do this then? It has to be on blur. It can't be on input. All right. Anyway, I got to get to work, so I'm going to finish up this stream for the day. But yeah, thanks everyone for watching. I'm going to see if I can figure this problem out later. And it's been over an hour and a half, so this was a blast. We're getting closer and closer to the ideal API. All right. See you, everyone.